Well, we're just seeing a smoky, sunny day coming to an end in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. Wednesday brings a cold front that'll be moving through the Northeast. We'll see what that front will bring us. We're watching a low off the Southeast coast for late this week. That might bring some rains there. And the holiday weekend getting ever closer, cautious but optimistic. That's our view here on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, which of course is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. You're a professional landscaper. You're a do-it-yourselfer. Or, I don't know, you just need topsoil and mulch. Well, get over to Omni because they've got tons of topsoil and mulch and the best prices in town. 631-756-1125. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Yes. And Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, enjoying the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The referral link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this live show, but later you'll be watching it as a video. And if you do decide to make a purchase, whether it be the Tempest Weatherflow system or any of the other weather gadgets that they have, even weather fashion, use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, and you get
10%. Not 9, not 11, not even 1, but 10 big percent.
And that's good. So, good evening, Mr. Rayo. Good evening to everybody on the chat board on this Tuesday night, the 23rd of May, as we continue to march along. By the way, we have actually now, it occurred to me today, we actually have 4 holiday weekends that are going to be considered the summer weekend. There's Memorial Day, Juneteenth Day, so there'll be a 3-day weekend around Father's Day weekend, I think. And,
that's right.
Yeah, there'll be a 3-day weekend then. And the 4th of July, which is not, it's always on the 4th of July. If it happens to fall on a Friday or a Monday, you get a 3-day weekend. Otherwise, you don't. And, excuse me, and Labor Day. So this is the first one. Cautious optimism. I think we could safely say that Saturday looks like it's going to be fine. Sunday, I think, is going to be okay too. It's a question of the bigger issues for the weekend. I think are going to be how much, if any, cloud cover that we'll have. I don't really think we're going to have much rain to talk about, if at all. So maybe when we get a little closer, it might show some scattered stuff. But I don't think you're going to see it on Saturday. But the one thing we should mention, by the way, because this is also for a lot of folks that go heading to the shore, we're going to have a pretty stiff northeast wind Thursday and Friday coming into the coast with that big high coming down. So that probably sets up for rip currents and rough seas. So if you are, if you're brave enough to go into 50, water temperatures that are still in the 50s, especially after it's been upwelled, well, just be advised, you're going to be dealing with rip currents and some rough surf.
Yeah, temperatures are pretty much upper 50s to maybe near 60 degrees, but certainly much too cool for me, and I'm sure for you too, Joe, to even step into the water for now. If you're a member of the Polar Bear Club, it doesn't matter to you, but for most of us, this is going to be for swimming a not great weekend. However, it does look like I'm go along with you with some cautious or guarded optimism. It looks like we are looking at a dry holiday weekend. Maybe we could call it, I call it partial sunshine for Sunday and Memorial Day Monday. A bit more in the way of sun for Saturday, and a bright day, lots of sunshine probably for Friday. And in terms of the haze related to the high-level smuts, the high-level wildfire smoke, I think that we'll probably have to deal with it again tomorrow. But during the day on Thursday, I'm thinking that we're going to be seeing less and less of that haze and more in the way of clearer skies, and probably bright, sunny blue skies by Thursday afternoon, spilling over or lingering on into the end of the week on Friday.
Yeah, you're gonna have that. You're gonna when that upper trough goes by that's pushing this cold front through tomorrow. Those upper winds are gonna go more northerly as opposed to northwesterly. So that should clear up the smoke for a day or so, I would think.
At least for a day or so. But you remember the last time we had an upper low that turned winds into the north? It lasted only for so long, and then all of a sudden, all of that schmutz came back. I'm not sure if it was last Tuesday or Wednesday, and I said it came through here or came into our area like a wall from the west. So we may again see that maybe sometime over the holiday weekend, but we will, I think, clear things out for at least a day or two, beginning early on Thursday and continuing or carrying over into Friday.
Now I saved the satellite loop of the Northeast, which should be on the screen now from earlier today. This was around midday. It struck me that this is the smoke, the hazy look to it, that milky, what looks like clouds, that the sort of milky. That's not clouds. That's the smoke. More intense today than it has since this whole thing started. Did it play out that way at from your vantage point?
I don't know. I really couldn't. I really wasn't out all that much today, but from what I was able to see, it still looked quite hazy out there. And I haven't had a chance to check out the sunset. I'm assuming it'll have that. And you have no clue, Joe, up here in the tri-state area. I think every local weathercaster showed images of the either rising or setting sun and showing it to you as a big red ball near the horizon, pointing out that all of that was being caused by the smoke. I'd like to see, however, that smoke dissipate during the day on Thursday behind that next cold front. And that cold front could provide us with a little bit of a cleansing of the atmosphere, too, especially north and west of the New York metropolitan area later tomorrow and tomorrow evening.
Yeah, I just freshened up the satellite loop to the latest images right before sunset. I mean, it's really covering everybody from New England down to North Carolina, going back west into the Great Lakes, and in fact on the U.S. loop. And again, this first shot here is from around midday. The smoke extended from all across the Ohio Valley and the northern part of the Ohio Valley and through the Great Lakes and on up into the northern plains. I mean, it's just, and of course, obviously back up into Canada. And you could also see the cloud edge that's moving southward toward Lake Superior. That is the leading edge of tomorrow's cold front, which might produce a shower or thunderstorm. I think there's probably a better chance as you go up into New England with this because there's not a whole lot of moisture to deal with this frontal system that's coming on through.
It looks like if there's going to be any thundery activity in the immediate tri-state area, it would probably be north and west of. Well, let's put it this way: for showers, scattered showers, I'd go north and west of 287. For lightning and thunder, maybe you'd have to go further north. Let's say north of 84. So north and west of New York City. New York City and Long Island may not see anything. That shows you this the setup for tomorrow with that cold front. But yeah, and obviously, if you go up into New England, the odds seem to be a bit better because there's a little bit more energy and moisture with the front up there as opposed to further south down here.
In the meantime, we have we have some thunderstorms going on this evening in Florida. We will have some thunderstorms, and actually they are now bubbling up in West Texas. Those are the primary areas of risk. You see where the lightning strikes are. I don't know, the satellite loop here with the lightning strikes is a little weird because if you look in the Gulf of Mexico, for example, when the loop starts, it looks like there's a whole bunch of thunderstorms, and then they're suddenly gone. So there must be some errors that are being produced here by whatever creates these images. The same if you look at Arizona, for example. There's all the what looks like lightning strikes in Southern California and in Arizona, and then after a few frames, they just disappear instantly. No, I don't think it was from thunderstorms that were there and just suddenly vanished. But we do have some activity tonight as we give it a check, and we have In Florida, we are seeing some heavier thunderstorms in the state, up and down, mostly in the interior, and there is the isolated severe thunderstorm warning that shows up right over Lake Okeechobee, and also a special marine warning as of 7:48 p.m. Eastern Time off the right around the Florida Big Bend. We've got some scattered showers and storms in parts of Georgia and South Carolina. Nothing really to write home about. And then we go into West Texas, where we have more numerous showers and thunderstorms and severe thunderstorms. Got a whole bunch of severe thunderstorm warnings that are up in northwest Texas, and we have scattered activity throughout the southwest and on up into the central Rockies and points northward. And you can also see the cold front here that's dropping down from east through eastern Canada and Lake Superior. There's a hefty band of showers, but again, as we said, it's gonna that's a lot of that's gonna the southern edge of that anyway is going to fall apart. The area that gets into New England might hold together a bit more, but it comes in, goes out, and the weather I think tomorrow for most of eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England should be okay until right before the front passes. I don't think it's going to cloud up all that quickly.
As Chuck Cardillo's asking, would high top developing thunderstorms bring any of the smoke stuff or smoky smell down to the surface? I would suppose if we got some downdrafts that of significance, and maybe some of that stuff could be forced down to the surface. But what else can you say? It's at least the stuff is basically confined to areas well above our heads, and so we haven't had to worry about reduced air quality. But again, maybe one of those stronger storms. But again, the chances of getting a strong storm in any one spot in the immediate tri-state area tomorrow probably about 1 in 5. So I wouldn't get too concerned about that.
And the Storm Prediction Center, SPC, tonight is. Let me get to the day one outlook, and here it is. So there you have it. You've got a marginal risk over the state of Florida, except for the Northeast, and we have seen, as we said, a couple of isolated severe thunderstorms. And then in that slight risk zone, that's where we're seeing the numerous severe thunderstorm warnings tonight in West Texas, and that also comes with a 2% tornado risk in some of that area inside the slight risk. Marginal risk surrounding that. Marginal risk in northwest Utah, northeast Nevada, and southeastern Idaho. And they had this little general thunderstorm area in south central New York going east toward, what would you call that? East central New York, where Albany is? Central East? Upper Hudson Valley?
Upper Hudson Valley, Eastern New York.
Eastern New York?
Call it Eastern New York. Now, I realize, of course, that we're in Eastern New York. New York City is.
Right. Well,
and I realize that Glen Falls and Lake George is Eastern New York.
Well, we could say that it's in the southeast portion of northeastern New York.
Right.
Right. I want a Weston sandwich. If he wants Weston sandwich, I want an Eastern sandwich. Well, I want the eastern portion of his Western sandwich. Okay. Blonde meter, folks, in case you didn't know. Okay, WPC, our friends at WPC on their latest, showing a little bit of precip here, but some of this might be from tomorrow, so it's hard to know what's front-end loaded or not. Certainly in New England, it's front-end loaded for sure, with 1/4 to 1/2 inch and 1/2 to 3/4 in northern Maine. But around southern New England, nothing for the next 7 days, and that back edge of nothing goes over Long Island to about New York City, and then you've got a few hundredths, maybe a tenth or so in New Jersey, northeastern PA, 1/4 of an inch stripe there in the Hudson Valley going into Massachusetts. You get into the larger amounts of 1/2 inch plus when you get down into Virginia, North Carolina, then you get to the North Carolina coast and the South Carolina coast, and you're talking about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, or maybe even more. They got a ton of rain showing up offshore, and we'll explain that shortly. Meanwhile, In the southern plains, we are seeing what could be up into the central plains some decent rainfalls over the next 7 days. Although if you're in eastern Missouri, eastern Kansas, and into Missouri, it's less, quarter of an inch or less. But you start to go a little bit more toward the middle of those states of Kansas and Nebraska. Then you start to get to the half and three quarters of an inch and three quarters of an inch to an inch and a half in a few of those purplish areas, and inch and a half to 3 inch amounts possible in Texas. Some of that going on tonight with the thunderstorms, and also up in the northern Rockies, seeing three quarters of an inch to an inch and a half rainfall amounts there. So why don't we check what the NHC is doing? I haven't looked today, so let's see if they're saying anything with regards to activity in the Atlantic. Nope, tropical cyclone activity not expected in the next 48 hours, so that takes us into Thursday. So let's look at the next 7 days. Nope, no new tropical cyclones are expected there. In the eastern Pacific, no new tropical cyclones are expected there, and I don't even have to check the central Pacific because they usually stay quiet until August or something. Anyway, so let's back off. Let's back away and look at what's happening here in the east. And by the way, it's kind of interesting that in this pattern we've been in, I'm going to just go back to the U.S. satellite for a moment. Uh, there's energy that's off the southeast coast. So you basically, the way the pattern is set up, you sort of have you have an onshore flow, an easterly flow coming into the southeastern part of the United States. Here in Georgia, for example, we're being affected by what's called the wedge, when you get a weather front that stalls out to the south and east of you, and you get a northeast wind going through the mountains, and that tends to produce a lot of clouds. We've seen now two lows get generated east of the Bahamas that are just sort of moving away to the northeast, and that's where the storm track is. Now, another couple low, or possibly two, will be generated off the southeast coast coming up late this week and into next week. So the risk is, does any of that moisture that's going to be sitting here in the southeast for the next several days or longer, is any of that going to move up the eastern seaboard? And that's really, Joe, going to solely depend on the strength of this high that builds in for Thursday and Friday. And it just seemed that it's going to be strong enough to keep most of that, maybe not the clouds so much, but it probably should keep the rain away.
I sometimes wonder, and they sometimes call Miami the sixth borough, because so many people who retire from the New York metropolitan area go to what they say is their dream retirement community or dream retirement location, Florida. They've all dreamed about relocating to Florida. But what do they know about Florida? They say, oh, it's so much warmer down there. Oh, it's so much nicer. They call it the Sunshine State. But I wonder if retirees, people who are in their late 50s or 60s or 70s or whatever, and they sell their homes and they go down to Florida, really understand what they're getting into when they go to Florida. Case in point, almost the entire Florida peninsula today is covered by clouds, showers, and scattered thunderstorms. And usually that activity peaks during the mid and late afternoon and early evening, not just for a day or so, but virtually every single day. It's like that, along with high levels of humidity as well. And, rarely does it ever get to or above 90, except maybe along the immediate west coast of Florida, where sometimes around Fort Myers, those places, they'll get to 90 or 93. But most of Florida usually is in the mid and upper 80s, moderate to high levels of humidity, showers and thunderstorms almost daily from May all the way through the end of October. And I wonder if anybody who's decided to pack up and move down to Florida, I'm especially thinking about, women who, talking to their husbands, Marty, I didn't know it was going to be like, if I knew it was going to be like this, I never would have moved down here. It rains almost every day. Every day it's raining. How am I going to put out my clothes to dry?
All right. To be fair, well, first of all, Florida in the summertime, nobody goes out after 9 or 10 a.m. Everybody's out between 6 and 9 a.m. You get the early bird breakfast for $1 or whatever it is. Then they go
Yeah,
hide in the air conditioning until 5 p.m. or so when they go out for the early bird dinner, which you get for $2 or so. Uh, Actually, you probably don't know this, but living here in North Georgia, there are a lot of folks here who have a home here and a home in Florida. So they go down to Florida during the winter months, and then they come up here in the summer months to escape the heat.
right.
Because if you're lucky enough to be near a beach, that's one thing. But if you're living inland in Florida, it could get pretty oppressive during the summertime, and it's tough to take. So they come up here because the nights here in the mountains the temperatures most nights. I don't think I've seen a night where the temperatures didn't get at least into the 60s, and most nights it gets down to the low 60s. So yeah,
David Schwartz. David Schwartz is writing on the chat board. $2 early bird dinner. What the hell do you think this is? What the hell
I know.
year?
Okay, I wasn't. It wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be taken literally. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. Okay. Um, it's just they got those early bird specials, whatever it costs, and everybody goes out. We got to go out for the early bird special. Is what I would I would hear my friends say.
And the other thing about Florida, and I've noticed this every time I've gone down to Florida. I haven't been down there in a while. I used to go down a lot when they had space shuttle launches, but the other thing about Florida, the insects are like 2 to 4 times bigger down there.
Oh yeah, they need runways, especially with the palmetto bugs. You got to get those lights that the runway people hold to flag the plane down and to tell them which way to turn. The semaphores.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's one thing I don't have here is a bug problem. I'm happy to tell you that the insects here in North Georgia are very well behaved.
What do you mean well behaved? You mean they just don't go come after you?
No, they're not the size of fighter jets.
Okay.
They're typical, typical stuff that you see.
That's somebody who on the chat board just now, David Schwartz said that his mom is on the east coast of Florida, and according to the local forecasters, it's going to be in the low 90s for the next 2 weeks down there. That is to me that's unusual. Because usually, if you live along the east coast, or as I came to know it, the space coast of Florida, you usually get the winds off of the ocean. You get kind of like a sea breeze front, which helps to ignite showers and thunderstorms, and usually keeps the temperatures just shy of 90. So if it's going to be in the low 90s, that's, I think, kind of unusual for them. They don't usually go for that long a stretch in the lower 90s. And God, I can't even imagine low 90s with the humidity so high down there. Dew point temperatures like 70 to 75. Ah,
Yuck.
oh, yes.
Well, here's your upper air, and there is your west-northwest flow today, coming right out of Canada. And here is your upper trough that runs across James Bay back into Minnesota. That represents the cold front. So if we're talking about the smoke, the trough swings through Wednesday night. You see it here. With an upper low there in northern Maine, and notice that the winds behind it, the upper air winds, are from the north. So Thursday morning, we're going to have a nice fresh northerly wind in the upper atmosphere, and that should mean that the smoke source gets cut off for a little while. Also notice, by the way, big upper high building over Minnesota. You've got troughing in the southeast down into the Gulf of Mexico. You've got troughing in the west as well. So it's kind of a split flow type pattern here, and it may work to our advantage when it comes to the holiday weekend. That northerly flow holds on into Friday afternoon before the upper low pulls out, and then the upper high gets in. And if you watch in the southeast, you'll see the bottom of that trough forms a closed upper low over Alabama and Georgia. That's not good for me for the weekend. That's probably going to mean for showery rains sitting over there in the southeast. It's not making any northward progress. It's completely blocked off by this upper high
Right.
this finger of a ridge that comes in from off the Atlantic and goes all the way back up into the Great Lakes. So as long as that's the case, this is what would be problematic if it wound up moving up the East Coast. Well, it can't do it. It's pinned there until that upper high breaks down, and any moisture is going to come around the upper low, and it sort of gets up maybe into Virginia, perhaps going back west into, say, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, even into Alabama, and so on. But again, that's about as far north as it goes. It just may be a matter of whether some of the blow-off high clouds from any thunderstorms that develop that winds up trying to sneak into the Northeast. But that upper ridge holds, and even on Monday, this is Monday evening, Joe. The upper lows in South Carolina, you got an upper high sitting over New England, over the entire Northeast. This, to me, suggests that we got a good chance of pulling off a decent 3-day weekend here.
I think so. I think so. Now, I did mention, just for the sake of mentioning that, thinking that maybe a piece of that upper low might come far enough north. I mentioned on Tuesday the possibility of maybe a shower early in the day, maybe, but with a whole lot, not with a whole lot of conviction. So, yeah, I think we do have a fighting chance of having a decent, or at least a semi-decent, 3-day holiday weekend of weather coming up.
Now in the West, with this trough in the western part of the U.S., you're going to have a bit of a southwest flow from the Pacific going into the Central Plains. It's not an energetic kind of flow, but it is enough, I think, to bring up a little bit of subtropical moisture and push it up into Mexico, and eventually points up into northern Texas, northwest Texas, and then further north into Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado. So they're going to see some wet weather. Now, I think if we go before that, the southwest flow sets up there, starts to set up on Saturday, and then it starts to shift a little bit further to the east going into Sunday and Monday. In fact, eventually an upper low does form next Tuesday over Kansas. But look at that. You got this is unusual because you got upper low off of Southern California, upper low in Kansas, upper low in the Western Carolinas, upper high closed off into the Northeast next Tuesday. All of this is really separated from the main flow, which is way up, except for what's up in the Northwest. It's really pushed up into Canada. I would think that would keep it smoke free for more than just a couple of days.
I think so. They're going to last. It's going to be lasting more than just 48 hours, Joe. And that's for us up here in the Northeast, that's good. For you down across the southern and southeastern United States, again, I think of all the retirees down in Florida, because this does not look like a kind of pattern where you're going to be able to go out and have a protracted spell of dry weather and hit the beach. It looks like there's going to be a lot more clouds and sun over the Florida Peninsula this upcoming holiday weekend, and also that ongoing risk or threat.
Right. Well, they got that persistent easterly flow with lower pressures in the Bahamas. Now, here's the latest low that comes out tomorrow from there and runs out to the northeast. Now you got the big high pushing down, and yet another low forms off the Florida coast on Friday, and various models are trying to spin this up into dropping pressures down to about 1,002, 1,004 when it's off the South Carolina coast Friday night into Saturday morning. You can see the rain shield with that. I'm kind of hesitant to read too much into this. I mean, you could sort of look at this and say, if this was maybe later in June or July, or certainly in August, you might look at this and say, oh, well, maybe this could become a tropical depression or even a tropical storm. I don't know that even if it did, it doesn't really change anything. It's not like this would be a system that you'd have to worry about strengthening into something really significant. But there could be some gusty winds along the South Carolina, Georgia, southeast Georgia coast, closer to the South Carolina state line. If that low forms and is kind of as tight as it's being shown here on the GFS, and even the European has a tight little low there. But again, the surface high is holding. It holds all the way through And the rain again tries to get up. This is Monday morning where we got some heavy rain in northeastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia, but that's as far as it gets because that high is just going to be like a brick wall, keeping that rain out. In fact, I'm already into Thursday on this map, and you still haven't seen much, if any, rain in the Mid-Atlantic, yes, but not much in the Northeast until late next Friday and next weekend, the weekend after Memorial Day holiday weekend. We finally get to see maybe something if this is correct. Meanwhile, of course, with all those upper lows running around across the south, you see it generating some rain in the plains and the various areas of severe weather that we were talking about for West Texas tonight and again maybe tomorrow night uh, and maybe even again into early Friday into Friday. Uh, but there will be more shower chances there with that weak southwest flow coming in from off the Pacific. They seem to be, affected diurnally here, where they form and then they sort of die off during the night and then they reform again during the day. But that's going to continue on and off through much of next week in that particular zone.
And let me tell you also, and Joe will probably agree with me because the two of us were in media for a long time. And I can tell you that at the TV stations that we used to work at, either the executive producer or the news director probably would call us in and say, about this thing that's supposed to be developing over the weekend. I mean, what exactly are we looking at? And we would say, well, it looks like a regular low pressure system that will bring us some gusty winds and maybe some rain or shower activity. And then the next question will be, what is the possibility of it developing into a tropical storm or hurricane? And therein lies the twain that serves the difference between just a regular old wind and rainstorm and a possible tropical storm system. Once these things get a name, everything stops in newsrooms around the area that this system influences, and immediately it's like now it's no longer just wet and rainy or windy. Now it's let's say the name would be Alma. Alma's coming this weekend. Details at 11. And that's how they catch you. That's how they grab you. That's how they try to scare you and bolster their ratings or whatever. The difference really isn't all that much, Joe. I would agree with you. It's wind, it's rain. Okay, you're not going to have good weather
Right.
for the holiday. But as soon as they tag a name to the darn thing,
it becomes the apocalypse.
And then it becomes the apocalypse. Absolutely. So let's hope that they don't find the need or the necessity, they being the folks down at Coral Gables, Florida, the Hurricane Center. Let's hope that they don't find a need to say, oh, well, this does show signs of some tropical characteristics. Maybe we ought to call it, tropical storm, whatever. Don't do that, because then everybody's going to go into a frenzy, and then immediately this potential system or the system jumps to the top of the news. People get frightened. They run to the supermarkets or whatever. It just looks like a regular, good old-fashioned, low-pressure system that's going to bring clouds and wet weather to a good part of Florida and the Carolina and Georgia coastline for the upcoming weekend.
Now, on the other hand, we have Typhoon Mawar that is bearing down on Guam, and here's the satellite loop courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. The enhanced loop here, very well-defined system. Looks like it's undergoing some kind of reorganization of some sort, maybe some eyewall replacement cycle, which storms of this intensity often do. Now, this would be something to concern yourself about if it were going to be impacting anybody in the United States. Certainly in Guam, they've got the appropriate warnings up and everything else. 12.5 north, 145.7 east. Top winds are 120 knots. Minimum central pressure now 940 millibars, so it's a little stronger than what it was yesterday. And you can see the forecast track here as it loops around to the northwest and west-northwest, and then continues on a west-northwest course for the next 5 days. Just want to see. They're forecasting this to get to 140 knots, Joe, with gusts to 170 by 18Z on the 26th, which is Friday.
Gusts to 170?
Yes, 140 gust to 170. Then they actually weaken it
That's
down to a
195 mile per hour.
yeah. Then they weaken it to 115 knots to gusting to 140 by the time we get to Sunday afternoon. It is 391 miles from Manila in the Philippines. Just kind of looking at some of these points here. Uh, Navsta Naval Station. I'm sorry, Naval Station Guam, 3 miles away at this point, and from the Weather Service forecast office in Guam, it's 13 miles away. So it's pretty much moving over Guam even as we speak. And then you see on the maps, their forecast maps are different, in style than the hurricane centers are, and you see how they have how they have it. The winds with the 120, 125, 125, 125, 130, and then you have the peak wind here at 140 when it's in this particular position right there. This is kind of centered near. There's the 130, and there's the 140. You see it there. And at the point that it's down back to 115, it's closing in on, if it continues on this course, it looks like it'll be passing, it may go to Taiwan. I'm sure this is going to be in the news going forward. Very impressive from the standpoint of a tropical cyclone. And early, well, in the West Pacific, they actually can have a tropical cyclone just about any month of the year. So, but this one's a powerhouse.
No question
No
about it.
question.
Yep.
So anyhow, let's see. I have Briller Jeopardy tonight.
Before you get the Briller Jeopardy, if you want to give me a chance to share something with everybody.
Okay, just a second.
And Ms. Spallerite, in fact, reminded me of this.
Hold on. La 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 la. Go for it. Knock yourself out, Mr. Rayo.
Right, I'm going to try to. Hold on for a second. Oh, I see. I see what you did.
What did I do?
Well, my Zoom screen is shrunk or minimized. Now now it's not.
Okay.
Now it's good. Okay. All right. So let me put this up for all to see. And if it happens to be clear around your area tonight or this evening, I know it's rather smoky for some, but this should be able to show through the smoke. We have a very lovely, may I call this celestial tableau going on in the sky this evening, shortly after dark, which is, well, maybe it's not exactly dark yet, but give it another about 25 or 30 minutes and it will be dark. We have the planet Venus, which glowers like a nightlight out there in the western sky. Big, brilliant star-like object, not twinkling because it's not a star, it's a planet. And tonight, above and to the left of Venus, we will have a lovely crescent moon. If the skies were clearer or more transparent, you might actually be able to see the dark part of the moon, which is called Earthshine. And it's called Earthshine, Joe, because if you or any of our viewers were astronauts on the moon and you were on this part of the moon where the sun wasn't above the horizon, what you would see in the sky would be an almost full Earth. And the Earth, as seen from the moon, is 4 times bigger than the full moon as seen from here on the Earth, and also about 40 to 80 times brighter because of all the clouds, because of all of the ocean effects, the sunlight reflecting off of the Earth. And so on that part of the moon where there's no sunshine, but an almost full Earth, that Earth is lighting up the landscape with a kind of an eerie bluish gray cast, if you will, lighting up the craters, the mountains, the landscape of the moon. And from here on the Earth, when you look up toward the moon, when it's a thin crescent, you see that bluish gray light on the dark part of the moon. That's us. That's light that's coming from the sun, hitting the Earth, bouncing off of the Earth, goes up to the moon, and then that faint light gets bounced back toward the Earth, and we see it. We call that Earth shine. It almost makes the moon look three-dimensional, especially if you have binoculars. But tonight, we've got not just the crescent moon, but below and to its right, we have Venus. And above Venus and the moon, we have two of the brighter stars in the sky, Pollux and Castor, marking the heads of the twin brothers, Gemini, the twin brothers. They're in the western sky too, and shining, however dimly, to the left of the moon, well to the left, is a much, much fainter object compared to Venus with a kind of a yellowish orange glow, and that's Mars. Mars is only about twice as big as the moon, and right now it's about 200 million miles from the Earth, which is why such a small object like Mars shines relatively dimly as opposed to Venus, which is much closer. And also, Venus shines brilliantly because it has all those clouds, which act as excellent reflectors. Anyway, if you're out and about after the show is done tonight, step outside, look over toward the western part of the sky. You should still, in spite of the smoke, see Venus and the crescent moon. And if you look hard enough, maybe you'll even be able to see Pollux, Castor, and Mars. And tomorrow night, the moon will have moved because the moon is so much closer to us than either the stars or even the planets, Venus and Mars. So the moon will have jumped from its current position tonight to the upper left of Venus, well to the upper left of Venus tomorrow night, and actually above the planet Mars. So a little thing to watch for in the West, a little drama, if you will, of celestial interest to those of you sky watchers and stargazers in our sky tonight. And now back to Joe and Briller Jeopardy.
Yes, I'm having a little fun on the chat board. Um, so, is everybody ready? So
Yes, I'm ready.
we're off letters, we're off prepositions. Although if anybody's mean to me, I may bring them back. So tonight on Briller Jeopardy, we're going to do a potpourri of questions here. So the varying topics, I guess, as we move along. So there's a couple of interesting questions here. There are 4 states, okay? There are 4 states, and its capitals where the states begin with the same letter, okay? Actually, there are 5, okay? There are 5 states where the state capital and the state both start with the same letter. So, have at it, folks. Can we name any of those? Hold on a second. I just got to type. Yeah, go ahead, Joe. Can you name any?
I'm thinking, I'm going through the Rolodex in my head and trying to determine which, like I was going to say, for example, Alaska. I was going to say, oh, Anchorage, but then I realized it's Juneau for
Right.
Alaska, so that's out. And Colorado is what, Denver, or is it Colorado Springs?
Well, Colorado is not part of this, so that would be
Okay.
wrong.
Okay.
I'm seeing a few guesses. Chuck Cardillo. Okay, so can you name me the capital? Chuck Cardillo's got the state. So you need me to name the state and the capital. So we've got
Okay,
Chuck
City.
Cardillo says Oklahoma, and Craig Carlberg says Oklahoma City.
Yes.
And that is correct. Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. So that's one. Rich Rothmansky gets the next one, which is the letter H. We have Hawaii, and the capital of Hawaii is Honolulu.
Honolulu.
Honolulu. Let's see. We have a few people deciding to give Sunday sermons on the chat board. I'm trying to go around them.
Right.
Let's see. James Davidson said good night. Come on, folks. That's one. You've got 4 more. Dover, Delaware, Michael Azara. Dover, Delaware, correct. And Patrick Darcy, Joe. Indiana, Indianapolis,
Indianapolis.
Indiana.
Yes.
Christinapedia a little late with the Dover, Delaware, but we'll still give you credit. So we've got them all. Actually, there's four of them. There were four. Indianapolis, Indiana, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Dover, Delaware, and Honolulu. Now, what is the only state capital, Joe? The only state capital that has one syllable.
One syllable?
Yes, and you know this because you worked there.
I've worked there?
You worked, you did something there. You did radio there.
Okay. One syllable.
One syllable.
Again, I'm going through the one syllable.
One syllable.
Oh. South Dakota? Pierre?
Yep, Pierre. Pierre.
That's right.
It's not Pierre, it's Pierre.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I'm glad you remembered that I did do, however briefly in my career, I did do Pierre, South Dakota.
Well, you got a lecture, didn't you?
I got a lecture. I said Pierre the first day out, and they lectured me. Said, no, it's not Pierre. It's Pierre, South Dakota. So there you go.
Right. Okay. Now, what was the first toy advertised on television?
The first what now?
The first toy ever advertised on TV.
Couldn't be Mr. Machine. Oh God, the first toy.
Christinapedia has already hit the answer.
Mr. Potato Head?
Mr. Potato Head.
How do you like that?
Mr. Potato Head. And the fourth one, final question. This is a little difficult, a little more difficult. And technically, it's not a rhyme, okay, because of the way the words are spelt. They don't technically meet the definition of a rhyme, but they do sound like they rhyme. So I will give you that. There are two cities, both with 6 letters in them, that they're the only two state capitals that sort of rhyme. And I will give you I'll give you a hint, okay? Both state capitals have the letters N, T, and S in them. N, T, and S in them. And Connie Fitzgerald got it right away. Very good. I'm impressed.
Oh, that's what you were going for. Austin, Boston.
Austin, Boston. Now, if Austin had ended in an ON, then it would be technically two rhyming words. But because it ends in IN and Boston ends in ON, that is not considered by the rules of English to be a rhyme. I thought that was pretty interesting.
It was
very smart. Our the folks on the chat board and our studio audience here, Joe, are really just they're very, very smart. They just are.
Connie Fitzgerald is no relation to His Holiness Brian Fitzgerald, is he?
Oh, Terrence Cardinal Fitzgerald? No, I got to call Terrence Cardinal Fitzgerald.
Yes, have him come on.
Yeah, school's going to be out soon, so he'll have plenty of time. Here I am. I left myself off the screen for a while. I'll have to talk to Brian. I got to give Brian a call. All right, so I think that pretty much wraps it up for tonight. Somehow we managed to get this to go for an entire hour.
Right, even with very little to talk about in terms of weather.
Right, which, it happens. So, the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow, the revolutionary Tempest weather system. You get it, and you can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. They have all sorts of weather gadgets and gizmos and clothes and so on. Father's Day's coming up, so you might want to get a gift for Dad. Might get him a weather station. Works for me. And if you use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, you get
10% off. And where else can you get something like that?
well, yeah. And also, by the way, Tempest is an affiliate of the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and also brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number for all the topsoil, mulch, and dirt that you need. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
yes. All right. I didn't, I'm sorry. I don't want to start a problem on the chat board. I've already said enough.
You could say that tomorrow will be our last show until Memorial Day. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Well, it might be. It might be. If there's a chance that that system off the southeast coast were to spin up into something tropical, I guess that we should do something on Thursday or Friday. But again, that's a long shot chance. And as you said, it really won't. It really wouldn't matter too much. Oh, um, Johnny Marine and Clark Kent, I appreciate what you say, okay, but you're getting to the point now where you're really starting to annoy me. All right. So can you stop? The show's over.
Clark,
Right.
Clark, if you don't stop, I have a little sachet over here of kryptonite, and I'll open it up and expose you to it, and that'll be that.
Clark asks the question, what do you are you good enough to enter heaven? Well, first of all, Clark, as I mentioned, says on the chat board that my train ticket is stamped STH, straight to hell. Okay, but I've often wondered, so what's the point of heaven if it means that I have to avoid the same tiresome people that I avoided here on Earth? So we just stop. It doesn't belong here, So we're a we're a place where weather people hang out. We tend to get irreverent sometimes. So nighty night, okay? Nighty night to everybody on the chat board, and thanks for being here as always. Thanks for those of you who are lurking in the background. If you haven't subscribed to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, do so and turn your notifications on so this way you won't miss tomorrow night's show, which is at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Good night.
Good night, folks.